Ethereum is at about 2550. For some of you shitcoiners, degenerates, Solana is at 170. And you can kind of go down and kind of look. The total market cap of crypto right now, when I woke up, it was 2.43 trillion, and we're down to 2.37 trillion at the present moment. 24-hour volume in the market is 82.87, which it's down significantly. It looks like in the 24-hour, we're down about 22.8%. So there's a lot less volume today, which I guess kind of would make sense with the price action that we're seeing, things going down a little bit. And Bitcoin dominance, which did reach 60% earlier this week, is currently at about 59%. That's a big deal as well. Big Daddy is reigning king. Yeah, so there's a lot of things going on in the space beyond just the fact that we have an anniversary to talk about. We are, what do we got? Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, 5 days, Rich, away from an election. We were just talking before going on air that in 5 days it's over. We kind of jokingly in jest said that because we both know that it's probably not going to be
early and
over.
often. Early and often.
It's probably not going to be over on Thursday. I would probably gather that we won't know who won officially that night. We probably won't find out maybe the next day or the day after. I mean, that's kind of the circusy nature of how we got it the last cycle 4 years ago. So
before you get too far, I want to apologize to anybody that the audio was fucked up for the first minute and a half, and that's my fault.
Okay.
I screwed up. So,
okay.
So yeah, to highlight where I fucked up,
Okay.
you were discussing the fact that it's the 16th anniversary of the white paper.
Well,
so.
good, because I said 15, so they didn't hear me mess
so
that
they
up.
didn't hear you. So we're
we're
1 for 1, but my mess up is a lot worse than yours. So, so yeah, apologize to your viewers, but I'll turn it back over to you.
Yep. Quick recap if you didn't hear. Defion Productions Podcast. I'm Don. It is the 16th anniversary of the Bitcoin white paper, which was released October 31st, 2008. On a cypherpunk newsletter website by an anonymous individual named Satoshi Nakamoto, and it birthed a revolution that we are still supporting today and talking about today. And I talked a little bit about the price. I don't know when it cut out, if you guys heard, but we're down a little bit today after reaching close to, depending on where you looked, all-time highs of 73.5, 73.3K Bitcoin around Monday and Tuesday. Today we're around 70,700. Bitcoin dominance, which did reach the 60th percent, is hovering around 59%, and volume is down about 23% ish over the 24-hour, which kind of would be accounting for probably this small little pullback that we're seeing currently with the Bitcoin price. Some other really big news that I want to talk about has to do with two large tech companies, MicroStrategy and Microsoft. We're going to talk about. They were in the news together this week for a very specific reason. Microsoft put out a report, and I'll read a little bit of the TLDR of what they said. MicroStrategy, which, like Microsoft, is a technology company, but unlike Microsoft, they hold Bitcoin on their balance sheet, and they've had their stock outperform Microsoft stock this year by 313%, despite doing only a fraction of the business that Microsoft has. And they are not alone. The institutional and corporate adoption of Bitcoin is becoming more and more commonplace. Microsoft's second largest shareholder, BlackRock, offers its clients a Bitcoin ETF. So Microsoft this week in their, I think it's quarterly report, maybe it's annually, that part I'm not completely sure about, were speaking about how they could obviously increase shareholder value, and they were talking about MicroStrategy specifically, because I guess Michael Saylor has been talking to Microsoft's CEO kind of about the strategy of what MicroStrategy did with the balance sheet of their company. Currently, at least as of this report, Microsoft is sitting on $73.5 billion of treasury assets. You can imagine the type of damage they could do buying Bitcoin with even fractions of that balance sheet. Microsoft, their first initial purchase was 500 million, and they didn't make a $1 billion purchase until I believe it was like 6 months later, and it took them years before they reached that first 10 billion of Bitcoin total Bitcoin purchased. And then obviously with the price appreciation, having that on their actual balance sheet as a USD value. So with Microsoft, they have 73.5. If they were to take 10 billion, I mean that represents not even 25% of their balance sheet. I mean it's something like 15 to 20% of their total assets that they have on the balance sheet. If they were to put that into Bitcoin, I mean it wouldn't represent the huge percentage that it did for MicroStrategy. So these companies are starting to take a look at the playbook that Michael Saylor has written in regards to how he basically, and these are his words, not mine, took his company from the depths of death and brought it back to a place where it's going to shortly be listed on the S&P 500. I mean, a company that was basically written off to being one of the top companies, and if they were to be included in the S&P 500 now, they would be right up there with the Mag 7 in performance and outperforming far outperforming the returns that you're getting in the S&P 500. So it's going to have a significant effect when it is added, just on the fact that if it keeps its same trajectory of how it's, I mean, it's this year alone it's up 313%. I mean, I think the S&P 500 is up maybe double digits, 12, 13%. I mean, you're talking extreme multiples of the S&P 500 that MicroStrategy alone is up. So it's good that we have these major companies and corporations that are taking a look at what MicroStrategy is doing. I mean, it won't get confusing, right? If Microsoft follows the same playbook, when you're saying Microsoft and MicroStrategy, like how many times are people going to mess that up when they're talking about one and talk about the other if they follow that same playbook, right? It's kind of crazy. Another thing I want to talk about really quick too, and obviously with the week that we had with the price action, it makes a lot of sense. Bloomberg analyst James Seifert was on the ETF report yesterday afternoon, and he was talking about how the spot Bitcoin ETFs have seen extreme inflows the past 13 days. I also saw something that Bitcoin Magazine posted earlier today about, and we already knew this, and I think we've already talked about this, but the Bitcoin ETFs are officially the largest ETF launch in volume for a first-year ETF in history. We've never seen inflows and gains in an ETF like we have with the Bitcoin ETFs.
And for a novice like me that's looking at, alternative ways to kind of make money off the Bitcoin, that's good news.
Yeah, I mean, if you're
for a guy like me that's hesitant,
mm-hmm.
you know what I mean? I think I represent, that population that's like, well, what is this? Still, my grandma said, don't invest like the newfangled, Bitcoin. Seeing that being legit, and like, okay, there's ways now that I can be part of that. Maybe I'm not all in, but I can be part of it. So
even better,
cool.
Even better news for guys like you is you're not even going to know, and because it's
that's a good point. Like
because
I don't really
performing.
know what, I don't. I mean, I can look into it. I do look at that shit once a year. I kind of look through my things and see what the companies are that are in my portfolio in the things that I'm buying. But you're right. Most people, I don't even know. I don't know if it's got GM stock in it. I don't know what high tech stuff is or whatever.
If you're a portfolio manager and you're rebalancing portfolios, it would be very callous of you not to take a look at these Bitcoin ETFs and figure out how you can add them into these portfolios that you're managing, that you're trying to get returns on. Right.
Yeah.
Your job is to rebalance a portfolio to make sure that you're outperforming the market. If this sector is up 313%. And you're taking a look to see like what the chances are that this is going to continue, and if you're doing your research and you're seeing that this is not a one-off, that this is going to continue, you would probably be not doing your job as an analyst in a portfolio rebalancer to not take a serious look at adding these to the portfolios that you're managing. So, like I said, a lot of people are probably going to start having exposure to Bitcoin through these ETFs that don't even realize that they have that exposure because of the type of investment vehicles and retirement vehicles that they own that are rebalanced and managed in ways that they're not taking a look at just because of the design of the retirement vehicle. So I think we're going to be seeing more and more of that. On top of the fact that you have many countries that are taking a serious look at, and some rumors that some already have and they just haven't been announced, that are putting it in their sovereign wealth funds. I watched not to get too far off topic, but I watched a really good interview, and I would recommend this to you, Rich, if you have a couple hours to watch. Anthony Pompliano interviewed Howard Lutnick this week. Howard Lutnick is the CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald. And when I hear Cantor Fitzgerald, I don't know about you, but when I hear Cantor Fitzgerald, the first thing that I think about is 9/11, because Cantor Fitzgerald lost the most people in the towers on
that's
9/11.
why that sounds familiar. Okay.
He lost 638 people on 9/11. And the wild part of that story is Howard wasn't in the building that day because his 5-year-old child's first day of kindergarten was that day, and he was at the kid's school when the plane hit the tower. He would have normally been in there, and his brother, who worked in the company, actually was in the building. But that's a side note. But just talking about how, I bring up Howard Lutnick, and I'm talking about that interview just because it was such a great interview, and it was a 2-hour long interview, and I typically don't like to watch interviews that are that long unless I'm watching the Joe Rogan podcast, because he's such a good interviewer. It's very tough to interview somebody for that long, but this was a really, really good interview. He did an exceptional job just explaining his thought processes of how he got started with Cantor Fitzgerald, how he ascended, and then the part about 9/11 he talked about for a good 40 minutes, and it was a really riveting to me of his point of view, his POV of how that all went down. The reason I brought him up, though, Howard Lutnick, is because he's had Trump's ear for the past couple of weeks, and Howard Lutnick was also asked by Anthony Pompliano, which is one of the reasons he was on the podcast, how much he owns in Bitcoin. And he didn't disclose an exact number, but he said that he's worth you look at, depending on where you look on Forbes, like billions, like the numbers in the billions. And when asked, he didn't want to specifically answer, but he said the number that he owns in USD value is in the hundreds of millions. So he's got hundreds of millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin on his own personally. So he's a guy that obviously gets it to have that much of one's portfolio invested in this asset. So and this is a long-winded way to kind of get to the reason I even brought him up, I guess, but he was talking about how Trump, because Pompliano actually asked, which Rogan tried to ask really quick, and Trump didn't do a very good job of answering it. It was never asked in the debates, and it hasn't really been asked by many interviewers, but the national debt. And we talked about that last week, about how Kamala Harris or Donald Trump doesn't really have a really good idea or policy or answer on how to reduce the debt. And Lutnick spoke specifically to conversations that they've had, and even brought in Elon Musk about how all three of them have had conversations on how they could address the national debt. And they were talking about using the balance sheet of the government on assets that they own to create revenue, which could pay down the debt. And he's like, that's what companies do. Like, companies have assets and they get interest off those assets, or they earn income off those assets and pay off the debt. And they were talking about just like specific land that they own and how they could utilize that to create income. And the government could essentially work as a business to create cash flow from a balance sheet and then pay down the debt. And one of the things he mentioned was creating a sovereign wealth fund. And the United States government, as we sit now, has about 200,000 Bitcoin on its quote unquote balance sheet because they own the Bitcoin. And that could be something that I know Trump has said. And again, I don't feel overly confident about Trump's understanding of Bitcoin, but he did mention it at the conference. One of the highlight points of his talk was the fact that if he gets into office, that he wants to protect that Bitcoin and put it on, and he did mention a U.S. government balance sheet. So that would be a very big. Not that Bitcoin, even in the value that it has, would put a huge dent on the national debt if you were to do that. But just it's the first time that I heard anybody mention anything about an actual like plan on how they would philosophically address the national debt. Howard Lutnick went from basically a nobody to the CEO of one of the largest companies, wealth management companies in the country. So he obviously knows how to run a company. And the fact that he was speaking about the government in terms of running a company and a corporation, I think that's what, when you have so much debt, you have to start thinking differently. You can't do the way things that you've done the last 40 or 50 years because obviously that hasn't worked. So again, I'm not saying that Trump's got all the answers. I'm not saying that Howard or even Elon has all the answers. And I have my own personal viewpoints and skepticism about Trump as well as Musk. I don't know enough about Howard Lutnick to have that type of opinion. I will say that this 2 hours that I watched of him speaking, I liked what I saw, and I definitely have a positive opinion of him just based on what I've seen from that. But again, I don't know enough overall to have a complete formulated opinion on him. But I thought that was good to see that there's actually been conversations on how they could address that huge, like, gorilla in the room or elephant in the room, whatever you call it, that nobody wants to talk about and nobody actually wants to have a plan to address. So I thought that was interesting. And again, just the 40 minutes that he talked about 9/11 and what he went through that day. And one of the things was like when he took over the company as a CEO, his vision was, I want my friends and my family. I want if I have to go to work and work 60 or 70 hours a week, I want to be around people I love. So I'm going to hire friends and family in the company. So he said when he lost 638 people on 9/11, it wasn't 638 employees. It was like 638 family and friends that died that day. And it was like
And
really
then
riveting.
you got to imagine just the survivor's guilt. Of
For sure. When I was telling my parents to watch it, I said the survivor's guilt comes right through the screen. You can see
like that's a thing. Like I've got a friend that experienced that, and like it's crazy. So good for him. I mean, those are the kind of people that we need, like that, to politicians to be listening to, not because maybe their expertise within their field, but just the fact that they're a human being. Like we just need to have a few more of those people in the room that are looking out for the little guy, that they work with, that they interact with. Like it's not just about their stockholders. It's everybody. We need a little bit more of that.
adults in the room.
Yeah. It's just, and that's my problem with like Musk specifically. Like I don't know. I think he likes being a celebrity more at this point. I don't know what he was like in his formative years in terms of when he was first getting going. I think Elon was a much more interesting character when you saw him less. You know what I mean? Like the more that I see him, the more I just don't like him. Not even policy, just driven. I just don't like him. Just like he's, I don't know. There's the more I learn about Musk, and I think he's surrounded himself with very talented people in many of his companies, and good for him that he knows how to hire some good people in SpaceX and initially in Tesla and some things like that. But not so much lately. Lately, it's more like he just likes being a celebrity.
Yeah, he definitely does. I don't know. I don't know what his vision is in regards to where he sees his place in a Trump administration or any sort of. I mean, what the guy's a CEO of 4 different companies, 4 different big companies, like major, not like little like mom and pop spots where you got 3 people working for you and you say you're a CEO on your LinkedIn page. Like he's a CEO of major companies, 2 of which are like publicly traded companies that are like making significant.
Yeah.
Well, Twitter's technically not publicly traded, but it's the biggest like news platform I would argue in the world. And Tesla's one of the hugest publicly traded companies. You're the CEO of these companies. Like, how do you have time to run those companies efficiently for your shareholders and the ones that do have shareholders, or for your employees or for the general public that you're saying that you're fighting for in regards to X and his, free speech agenda. How can you do all that and then have time to, I don't know if he would get a cabinet position per se, but like spend time at the White House talking about like world issues with the president? Like at some point you have to like know when you're biting off more than you can chew, and know when doing more is actually doing less, if that makes sense. Like trying to do more is actually doing less.
Well, and the other thing is that I don't really like the concept of someone that has privately and publicly owned companies also serving in a government position, because we already have a lot of corruption with some of our favorite senators just because of their connections and their investments within those companies versus, you actually working as the chair of the FCC or, whatever. Like and you have companies that are adversely going to be affected by your decisions, and he's going to generate wealth for himself. He's going to generate, and that's the problem. I like the concept of people within those industries working, but how do we guarantee that they're doing what's best for everyone and not just making sure that their companies, even if they're doing what's best for everybody, if their companies are profiting from it too, which they will, it's insider trading essentially. That's my problem with someone as powerful as him or Bill Gates or any of these guys getting involved in politics. Because, so for example, I don't like Bill Gates, and here's why I don't like Bill Gates, because he did this big thing where he like separated himself for his company and he donated all this money to education, and he created software for education and then sold it back to education. So yeah, like he basically made it sound like he was going to be this great guy that was going to focus on improving education. But what he did was he created products and got himself involved with companies that he profited from by making states buy that product. And so he's worth a ton of money in Microsoft, that a lot of it was because he had influence within like the government sector and public education. And what he did as a public educator, the stuff that he was involved in wasn't good. Like it didn't make education better.
I feel similar about Bill Gates for a little bit different of reasons though. What did it for me with Bill Gates was when he did that TED Talk. I want to say I might get the year wrong. Maybe it was 2015, maybe it was 2017, maybe it was 2019. It was sometime before COVID.
Yeah.
He did that TED Talk and he went into depth about a pandemic. And he said the word pandemic and spoke eloquently about how we would address a pandemic. And he talked about vaccines and he talked about all these things. And then the quote unquote pandemic happens and this guy's out there like numero uno pushing like vaccine. It's like you're doing this TED Talk because there's something behind the scenes that you're incentivized in order to talk about this stuff, because you're not just going to give your time to just do that, because you're just that's not the type of dude that you are. So you're talking about all this stuff, and then now you're like vaccine pusher number one, and also like doomsday soothsayer, because you were talking about a pandemic, and now everybody's looking at that and retweeting it, and that video comes back up of his TED Talk, and it's just like fear mongering about, oh my God, Bill Gates saw this coming, and it's like, dude,
yeah.
That's when I was just like, you know what, my respect for, and I don't know what's true or isn't true, but this whole Epstein stuff, like, who knows who, like, it's just,
yep.
Yes, you're gonna hide things, but like, the problem that I have with this whole Epstein list stuff is like, every Epstein list that I see is just like, ironically, all Democrats. You're telling me that if some shit's going down, that there are no ill human, like, what facet of life does any entity have only pure people? Like when we talk about cops, we know that not all cops are bad, but there's bad ones.
Yeah.
Not all lawyers suck, but there's bad ones, right? Not all financial advisors are out to kill you, but there's ones that are. Like every single facet of society
Sure.
has like bad apples. So when I see the Epstein list and I see hundreds of names and I go through and look and I can't find one Republican on the list, I know your list is bullshit. I'm not saying that those people didn't go. I'm not saying that that doesn't exist. But what I'm saying is, I'll never believe when you tell me that only one side is doing only one side of people is doing something bad.
Yeah, like to believe
It's
that
just
only
wild.
Democrats
it's just, come
or
on.
liberals or whatever you want to call them, people that lean, to that side, were the only people that ever went to Epstein Island that were on the plane. Okay, sure. Like the P. Diddy list, we're going to get the same thing. And like we got all these lists floating
Very
around
similar,
now.
yep.
And the funny thing about those lists is, let's be honest, if you're a big time, like let's think about Trump, for example. Trump's at the Clinton daughter's wedding.
Mhm.
I have no idea if Hillary
And they were-
Clinton...
and they
if
were at
they're-
his. They were
and
his wedding.
Right. Because you want to know why? Because that's how rich people do weddings.
They run in specific circle. When you're at the
Yes.
upper echelon of society, there's only so many people that are there.
There
and they all
there
run
are
in the same
people
circles.
you want at your wedding, your daughter's wedding. This goes, if you watch Game of Thrones, it's like you watch, like, this is the way they did it. Like, the French princess married the English prince. Like that's how we've brokered deals in this world for thousands of years. Like, before we even kept records, like this shit happened. Like my village in caveman era, this is how shit was done. So there are associations, and that doesn't mean everybody that was on the Epstein plane was, a trafficking or whatever you want to call it, but maybe they knew. It's the Harvey Weinstein thing. Like when you go back to film, like a lot of people knew what Harvey Weinstein was doing, and a lot of people couldn't do anything about it because they were just average people trying to go to work every day,
or didn't want to do anything about it because they were making so much money,
or they were making,
and
and that's the problem. Like, were you a collaborator, or were you just like, you couldn't do anything? Because if you did, you saw what happened to the people that did raise alarms, and that's why people say, "Oh, I was just just Harvey being Harvey," or like that type of thing. And that's the problem with all this stuff, is that guilt by association is a real thing. So you got to be careful with who you spend your time with, because it will come back to haunt you. Like it just will.
I mean, you want to talk Epstein client list conspiracy theories. How about this one that nobody ever talks about? How about the fact that we can't get the official list, or we can't see any of this stuff, is because half the list is the people that you don't want to be on the list.
Yeah, like it's those movies, those conspiracy movies where it's a judge, a senator. They always like, oh, there's judges and senators on this list and corporate guys. And we know that there are bad guys in those things. And I guarantee you that there are Republicans that were on the island doing awful things just as many. It was like when the cancel culture came in, and it was like, the guys that got canceled and gals that got canceled, they weren't all white, they weren't all black, they weren't all Republican, they weren't all Democrats. You got Bill O'Reilly getting caught, and you also had Charlie Rose getting caught. And these two guys they're the same guy. They're the same guy. They just marketed their product to different people, but they're the same guy. Charlie Rose isn't any different than and I like Bill O'Reilly. Like, I read his books, and I liked his interview style. Like, he was a jerk behind the scenes to women. Okay, I'm not surprised. Powerful guy being a jerk to women under his control. Wow, that's shocking.
Plus,
like
his age and his era, like that was I don't want to say accepted, because nothing's ever, you don't accept bad behavior. It was tolerated.
Right. Yeah, but you learn stuff about like presidents from like 1910 and the way they were. Like, yeah, that was just kind of accepted in society back then. Like, it whether it's right or wrong, it was kind of like people did that. Like, guys were unfaithful to their wives, and most of our presidents have probably been unfaithful to their wives. And if we went back the last 200 years,
Clinton's name comes up often when you talk about like the Epstein stuff. Like, Clinton's name is always tied to that. Here's my problem. The Epstein stuff is always like associated with like young girls. It's always like kids, children. It's always like the pedophilia realm is where the Epstein list lives, right? So it's like, as far as I know, Clinton's had many, many women come forward to say that he's had relationships with them. To my knowledge, none of them have been underage. They've all been consenting adults. He's a shitty,
even the most famous.
He's
one
a shitty husband.
Even the most famous one was an adult.
He's a shitty husband.
Yeah.
He's an unfaithful guy. But to my knowledge, he hasn't committed any like outside of like what he did in the
Anything
Oval
illegal.
Office.
Anything he did
Oval
wasn't.
Office
Yeah.
in regards to those type of
Yeah, I
legalities.
mean that's a different type of.
That's a
I'm
different type
talking
of
about like none of them were underage.
I've never heard anything
Right.
about Clinton about
Right.
being with underage women. So like your
and I'm
time,
sure Hillary didn't.
So your
was
time-
shocked to find out that her husband was unfaithful.
of
That's
course.
my problem.
So you're
with her.
tying Clinton to this Epstein stuff, right?
Right.
That's all underage stuff when he has no jacket of underage anything, right? So what I tend to lean towards is that they're probably overblowing the underage stuff. That there probably was things going on at Epstein Island. There probably maybe were some underage girls as well. But then maybe there were some girls that were also of age that were doing things there.
Right.
And if that's the case, then maybe Clinton was there for that. And if Clinton was there from that, then why wouldn't Trump be there for that? And
or
why
even
wouldn't
from the
why
other
wouldn't
direction,
any of these other people that are being unfaithful to their wives?
maybe Clinton went there once, was on the island, saw things he didn't like, and said, "Oh shit, I'm never going to this island ever again," for whatever reason. Now maybe he should have reacted to that. There are definitely guys that Epstein probably was like, "I need to make sure I have connections with powerful people to protect my ass," because like it'll be a chip like in the poker game that I'll have someday. Like I guarantee you that was part of his modus operandi.
I've seen as many pictures with Trump and Epstein as I have
Yeah.
with almost any other person
Yeah.
that's been tied to that list. And I'm not accusing Trump of anything.
We don't know.
I'm not saying he
don't
was
know.
ever on a
Yeah.
plane or at the. I'm just saying that like every list that I've ever seen is if there's ever been a Democrat on there, I'm sorry, if there's ever been a Republican on there, it's one or two, and
The
I
fun-
can't even think of
The
that.
only one I got to throw out that's hilarious is when Trump's
Stephen
plane.
Hawking?
No, when yeah, what is he doing there? When Trump's plane broke, he chartered a plane, and it turned out to be Epstein's plane. It was like when this was just recently, within the last 6 months, his plane broke, so he needed a temporary plane. And the plane that he was renting from the charter company turned out to be Epstein's plane. Now, everybody like wants to go crazy conspiracy theory. I just find it hilarious because like maybe because it's not like Trump's looking through a list and like, oh yeah, I want that plane. Like somebody on his staff probably got fired because like, what are you doing to me? Like people already want to try to throw shit that I'm like friends with the dude, and like you went and rented his plane. Like, like I just found that that's just the funniest side to me. Like that's just bad. Like we're just regular people. We've never rented a plane, so I don't know what the process is.
Yeah.
But I guarantee you, Trump was like, make sure the plane that you rent was my friend Epstein's plane because I have great memories. I'm like that didn't happen. That was just bad. It was a bad choice.
Since we're going down this road of conversation, you know what else is like super fascinating too? Like we live in a time where like I can pick up a phone. I don't have to go to a library. I don't have to call somebody and ask them any question I want to know the answer to. I can just input it in my phone and find some information in regards to whatever it is I'm trying to find. Right? So like I have access to so much more information today than ever in society. I can find answers to questions that I never could have found 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago.
Right.
All that is at our fingertips. While at the same damn time, we also live in a time where we have absolutely no idea what's actually true and what's not.
I was just reading an article about Google and how the Google search algorithm is just bad now.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's really their philosophy was we'll spend a lot of money up front to control the market. We'll be the main player in the game. And then after that, we'll just cut our services and we'll get rid of a ton of people and we'll just require computers and algorithms to just control the way what we want people to see. And like the quality of your Google searches is, and most people would agree that like Google does not do a good job. Like I wish I could find a better search engine that was a little bit easier. Like to it's almost like once you're logged in, like you're never going to get a good search ever again.
DuckDuckGo's not bad.
I've been playing with that one
It's
a little
not bad.
bit. Yeah.
Brave browser is a cryptocurrency-based blockchain browser that you used to be able to earn. I think you might still be able to, but we're in New York State and you can't on New York State. It has a Brave token associated to it. You can't get it in New York State anymore because of the crazy laws here. But they have a browser that you can search things on doesn't save any of your searches, doesn't track any of your stuff. Like it's all unique searches every time you do it. That's a decent one too.
I actually have two different Google accounts, and I use one for. I don't use my work Gmail Google account for my personal stuff. I've actually separated. So I have one if I'm just looking for shit that I want to buy. I'm not using my business one anymore. I have a separate one I use just for my personal stuff.
I'm more talking deeper layered than just actually the problems with our search engines and, and their monopolies. I'm saying that like the people that are actually, here's the problem, like the people that are searching for the facts for us that are allegedly the fact finders are going to the same places that we would go to. So it's just so easy to manipulate information and data now that it's hard to find out if you're like what is really the truth now. Like, and I don't know, honestly, like a really good like philosophical question to ponder on top of that is, was it always like this and we just didn't realize it because we didn't have the access to search like we do today? Like I remember vividly, like in my house growing up, we had like the 1975 or 76. Like if my parents are watching this, they'll know exactly what I'm talking about. We had a hallway in the upstairs that had the Encyclopedia Britannica's A through Z. Yeah. And you could go in there and like I remember doing reports in like high school, and I would like look in there if I couldn't get to the library or whatever, and I would like look and find information, and that was like my information source. And you know I would go on that, and you know like at the time if you're looking at something from the 70s, that things may have been updated, but I could get a general idea.
You could do a lot of basic research on a lot of things and with an encyclopedia, and it was pretty cool, and it was it was nice about it is that if you're searching something that was older, it was great. Like you were using up Teddy Roosevelt, there wasn't like new updates. You didn't have to worry about new updates for Teddy Roosevelt because whatever was in the encyclopedia was going to probably be accurate. So yeah, you're right. Like those things, having that search engine in your house, so to speak, like they were in my bedroom. They all ended up in my bedroom. We had two different ones. I remember the second one we got when you bought groceries or something, you'd get like each week they'd have the volume 1, volume 2. Each week we'd go grocery shopping, you'd get a different volume or whatever it was. And then as opposed to having to go to the library and then getting the card catalog and looking around and trying to research things. Yeah, there's definitely like we have a lot more information that it's easier to access. We also don't know how accurate some of that information is. And you guys, you end the show every week with, don't trust, verify. And that's the thing. I can read an article, but quite often then I kind of look it back up and I try to find a different perspective on it to make sure that if I go and I say it on a podcast like I have today, that like, how do I know that writer wasn't just an a-hole, like, and just made shit up? I don't know. I mean, I try to track sites. There's certain sites that I block because I know that traditionally they're not well respected. And I have done that. I block a lot of sites that I don't like their content because I feel like it's either negative or it's very, very biased. So it's hard. It's hard. You have to really make sure that you're, paying attention to what your sources are. Let's put it that way.
I'm circling this back to an important point I'm trying to make. And today I seem to be making like real long head roads into trying to get to the point. But no matter what you read, no matter what you research, no matter what article or person that you seek out that you believe to be as non-biased as possible, we're humans. We all have biases. Even when we try to be right down the middle, I mean, we all have biases. So no matter what source you're getting things from, no matter how independent you believe it to be, there's going to be some unintentional biases in those sources, right? Being that today's the 16th anniversary of the release of the white paper, one of the best things in the protocol in creation of Bitcoin is the fact, and I think probably, if not it's definitely one of the most important aspects. And you brought it up about how I say it at the end of every podcast. The fact that you do not have to trust anything. You can just see it transparently and verify it. The fact that there's almost no other aspect of society that you can do that there's always going to be a lean and biased in one direction, whether completely intentional or unintentional, it's going to exist in every area of life. You're not going to get something that has no bias at all. because we're dealing with human beings, and human beings are running things until we have the robot AI age. That may change during AI and robots. That could be different then. But as of today, as we sit here in 2024 on Halloween, there's bias in everything. But with Bitcoin and the protocol, there's no bias at all. It's just that you look at the blockchain, you look at the transactions, you look at the verifications, and you can see everything since January 3rd, 2009, if you would so choose and please. And there's no bias in that. The transaction is what the transaction is. There is no guessing. There is no I think. There's just what it is. There's nothing to trust. All there is verifying and seeing that it's there. When you make a transaction, there's confirmations that happen. Same thing. There's no, oh, I hope or I trust that it will. It's just, no, I don't have to trust or hope anything. If it verifies, it is. If it doesn't verify, it's not. And that is it. That is one of the most important technological aspects of this revolution that we're involved in with Bitcoin, because again, money is a means to an end, and people die over money. People kill themselves over money. They fight wars over money. All these things happen because of money, but money is not the thing that's important. It's what we get out of the money, how it buys us time, or the closest thing to time, how it allows us freedoms, how it allows us, in some respects, even though you say money doesn't buy happiness, it allows you the keys to a door that could potentially lead to happiness. Because if you're not dirt poor living on the street, you can change certain situations for yourself and others that can make you or them happier. So there is an aspect of that. And our money system that we operate in now is set up in such a corrupt and vile way that doesn't exist. We're in a debt-based system, right? In a debt-based system, you have people that are insanely in debt across the system. And when you have that burden that you're carrying day to day of debts, for some people much larger than others, it's hard to just have a quality of life. And everybody seeks that quality of life that's better than the circumstances, the situation that they're in, that brings all that life stress. And the better you are at managing money, the better off your quality of life becomes. But for many people, they don't understand how the money system works. So they're in this, like, you hear the proverbial rat race, and a lot of times the rat race is in reference to like people working dead end jobs, or, you know, the 9 to 5 and all that stuff. I think the true rat race is people's unintended misunderstanding of how the actual system of money works. And when you don't understand the system or the game that you're playing, you're in a rat race on the rat wheel, and you're running and you're not going anywhere because you don't know that there's somewhere to actually go.
Right.
And I think Bitcoin has allowed us an off-ramp of that rat race to see that there's something better and allow us a way to escape that quality of life death trap that the fiat system has birthed for us and has created.
A simple example for this is something that I'm going through right now in my own home, my own finances, is this concept of leasing a car. And it was a genius concept, because what it's done is it's taking equity out of people's homes for the car that they own. Because now you're just always rolling it over and getting a new lease. You're always getting it over, and every 3 years you're going in, you're dropping $3,000, and they give you a payment, and then they're like, well, if you drop down 4, the payment's lower. If you do the math, it's the exact same payment. It's just a question of you pay me now or pay me later. And 10 years ago, I never leased more than one car. Now I have, 4 cars in my house because I have 2 kids, and obviously they pay for their cars now. But it's a cycle that I'm caught up in, and I'm looking for a new car for my wife. My wife's looking for a new car because her lease is coming up, and I'm like, I got suckered. I'm in this constant. I'm not generating any equity out of this vehicle ever, and I'm mad at myself that I fell into it. And it's but I think it's easy because, well, and they were smart, because in the beginning leasing was a really, really good deal. And then every year it just started to work up. And then all of a sudden we got to COVID, and we're like, oh no, there's no cars anymore. And now we're all these years later, and they're still arguing, though, there's not enough cars and blah, blah, blah. And it's just really frustrating to me that I know it's the dumbest thing I ever did financially, was allowing myself to live lease to lease.
I would disagree with you on your outlook on the whole situation. we can debate on the whole leasing versus buying thing and that, because I see what you mean about that. But what I would disagree with you on vehemently is the fact that at any point in time do you ever truly have equity in a car. And I'll say that because when you buy a car and you put money down and you have a payment, and then at the end there's value that's left over from whatever you put in, a lot of times if you take a look at what you paid in interest, if you take a look at what you paid for the car, you take all the in the years you do it,
right,
and the repairs you put into it, the oil
right.
changes, all that shit that you do, like the equity that you have usually just gets transferred back to the dealer anyways because
True.
you need a new vehicle.
Right.
So you're trading whatever quote unquote equity you have. And here's the problem with the equity.
The only
it's
thing
not
before I go any
true.
farther is that at least when I go in and I sit down with, the guy on the other side of the table, at least I have now something that I'm bargaining with. If I go in empty-handed and I'm just going in on a lease, they're like, well, this is the price of the lease. And I can only negotiate so far. But sometimes, at least if I have a vehicle that I have some equity, I can at least have some level of negotiation. It's very hard to negotiate these things without any equity.
But it's not very different than going in there with your 3,000 or 4,000 that you're going to give them, because your 3,000 or 4,000 cash is worth a whole hell of a lot more than the 8,000 that they're going to tell you that trade value for the car or whatever the case may be. It
True.
usually washes. So what I lease as well, and the reason why I lease is because it's the headache convenience that I just eliminate out of the equation, because I don't want this fucking vehicle with equity at the end of it. I want to go in there, and a lot of times I my last 3 leases that I've done, I put on less than $1,000, and I just did a lease last year, and my payment was in the low 300s. For me, the way that I love to negotiate, so I'll sit there for 6 hours and I'll get the price that, like when I walked into the dealership the last time, they wanted like $3,000 down, $550 a month. And I went in there and I gave them, I think it was like $500 and my payment's $320. And I sat there for 6 hours going back and forth saying, go back to your guy. I'm not doing it. And again, not everybody wants to do that.
Right.
And they're banking on you not wanting to do that.
Right.
But for me, I don't want a vehicle at the end that I have to trade in and all that other nonsense. And I recognize that one of the worst quote unquote investments, or one of the worst places that I could put money, is in a vehicle, except the fact that it's a necessary evil, because I have to get back and forth to the
Right.
place that I'm going to generate income
Right.
for other aspects of life. So I know that no matter what decision I make in that life area, it's a loss. I'm never coming out ahead in that situation. So I'm looking for the easiest, most convenient way to navigate that shitty part of life, which is I have to have a car, and I'm not paying cash for a fucking $50,000 or $60,000 vehicle, because that's ridiculous. So I have to figure out, do I want this headache on the back end, or do I just want to have this 6-hour headache at the front end? And then at the end of it, here's the vehicle. Let's do it again. Let's run it back again. And that's why I think the lease for me, for somebody like me that doesn't like the back end headaches, it's been great, because I recognize that when I walk into the dealership after my 2 or 3 years are up, I'm going to dedicate an entire day to figure out how we're going to make this as
Right.
cheap as I possibly can get it, and as headache free on the back end when I come back and say, okay, here's the car, let's do this all over again.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I say that for you, that like I understand what you're saying, because you feel like you have equity, but when I've run the numbers and I've done the math, like it's not, there might be 1,000 or 2 that you do have on the positive side. On the other side, there's probably a little bit more equity that you actually do have,
Right.
but in the grand scheme of everything, when I put it all together, it's not like we're talking about $10,000 or $12,000.
Right.
So it's just not a number big enough for me to want to deal with the headache of all the other shit that comes along.
I think
with it.
for me, you're right. I mean, I get what you're saying, and you made obviously really good points. You know what you're talking about. At the same time, it's this kind of like, it's frustrating to me, because I do feel like it's been a manipulation, and it's the bigger picture for me that they know what they're doing. Like, this has been a great system. They go in the back. They play Parcheesi for 12 minutes, and then they come back out. They know you're sitting there. It's just the whole thing, and the fact that the cars and all this crap with the cars has just gotten ridiculous in the last 4 or 5 years. I guess it's the system bothers me more than that. I wish there was a better system. And I think to me, it's the same problem that we have with all of these systems, that we're caught up in these systems and we're trapped. We're not big, powerful people. We don't have enough control of our own destiny with some of these things, whether it's housing, whether it's cars, whether it's health insurance, whether it's our investments. It's the same crap. And that's like why I think like these alternative things, you know, the white paper is so important, because it created something that, when's the last time this type of thing was created that could help the little guy, so to speak?
You walk into a car, me and you walk into a car dealership, we can both walk out the same car and pay different prices.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with how much we make or,
Exactly.
or anything.
And God forbid you just walk in, and if it's just your wife walking in,
Yeah.
I hate to, or an old person, like it's like that manipulation. And like they did the most recent one was, oh, and that deal's only good for another 2 weeks. And I wasn't there with my wife, and it's probably actually a good thing because she's tougher than I am. And I was kind of telling her, I'm like, once they tell you there's a deadline, get up and go. Like, that's just bullshit. Like, it's just because you know what? They'll find a way to make it work. And so she's, you know, she drove the car home. So she's driving it around today for work. But
there's not really,
it's annoying.
The only issue is like, you can't eliminate all of that, because if you did, then you would completely eradicate car salesmen, because they wouldn't be incentivized to work in that industry, because the better the salesman you are, the more you're going to make. If everybody walked in there and the car was worth 30 grand and everybody paid the exact same sticker price, there wasn't a negotiation on either end, it'd be number one, it'd be a boring industry for them. Number two, it would be a capped compensation, and there'd be you wouldn't get people to come in. You wouldn't get the top. For a company that sells cars, you want the best people to work for you. You don't want just a bunch of people that are just like can flip burgers at McDonald's. You want people that have skills. So if you're a salesman, you're never going to look at the car industry ever if it's just a flat, everybody pays the same price.
True. That's a good
You
point.
have to have that negotiation.
Right.
And again, I walk in there and I know the game and I know how it's played. So I accept certain things that I have to give up. And again, the lease, they're not going to offer that if there's not a back end benefit for them.
Right.
So there has to be a couple enticing things for you, which for me, I've identified those couple things, while also recognizing I have to lose some things on some other aspects in order to gain the
and
things
it is
that
a
I like.
negotiation, and I'm fine with the concept of negotiation. Again, I don't want to circle back, but like, I agree. And I think it's a good point, but I think that's a microcosm of everything. Like, I feel like the car industry is just especially in this country, because this whole country is built on the concept of the automobile. Like, everything in this country revolves around the fact, if you think the way our society has developed since the 1950s, this entire country is designed around how we drive our cars. Whether it's like, you got to go to Orchard Park to watch a football game, like, because that's the best place to put the stadium, because everybody will drive there, and it drives that local economy because there's parking lots and there's bars and there's corner stores. So, I mean, but it's all driven around how we use our cars in this country. It's kind of funny. Like, everything is so geared around our country is so our auto industry and our country, like, the history of it is so tied when you think about how industry worked and manufacturing and everything from, you know, Ford, you know, back at the beginning of the century, you know, to now, like, how everything is so driven, you know, corporate buyouts for automobile organizations and things like that over the years. You know, they're not keeping up with other countries in manufacturing. It's just, to me, like, the auto industry parallels our own history of everything in this country.
Yep. All right, real quick, we'll talk a little bit about something that's going on with MicroStrategy too. I forgot to mention earlier. MicroStrategy announced that they're primed to buy $42 billion of Bitcoin over the next 3 years. The Bitcoin therapist on X tweeted this, and his take was that maybe we don't see a traditional bear market because of the buyers like MicroStrategy, and potentially, like I talked about earlier, if other companies like Microsoft start, you know, following the same playbook and they're all buying and the ETFs keep buying, maybe we don't see the big dips that we've seen in prior bear markets. That's something that we'll be talking a lot about in the next 12 to 24 months after we see what's traditionally the peak cycle sometime fall, winter of next year. So we'll keep an eye on that, and we'll obviously keep talking about that. Bitcoin has hit an all-time high in 113 different currencies as of this week. So now 113 different currencies across the world, many of which have been at all-time highs months ago. But with the run-up in USD this week, many more new currencies have seen that all-time high as well. Like I said, depending on where you look, I don't think we crested that this week. me and Troy were actually talking about it. I can't remember if it was 73.8 or 73.7. I know that I saw for a quick second 73.5, and it was super, super quick. It didn't even last that long. And then it went right back down to like 73.1. So I don't think that we hit it. We may have hit it on some exchanges, but the one that I look at, we definitely didn't hit it on that one. One of the last things that actually, let me do this one first. I'll talk about this, and then I'll read this article to kind of end the podcast on. Saifedean, fun fact of the day, he tweeted this a couple days ago. On any time horizon over 5 years, virtually every Wall Street money manager has underperformed every Bitcoiner who just buys and holds. Housekeepers, cab drivers, brain surgeons, programmers, and retirees have all outperformed the kings of finance. So usually I use that 4-year thing. The 5 still works. At any point in the 16 years of Bitcoin, 15 as it's been actually traded, on any time horizon over that time period, over 5 years, if you've bought and held and not sold Bitcoin, you have outperformed every single money management person on Wall Street over that time. Again, whether you're a housekeeper, a homemaker, a cab driver, flipping burgers at Burger King, or a programmer, or retiree, brain surgeon, anybody that's done that strategy has outperformed Wall Street. We'll end the podcast today talking about the U.S. Treasury dropped a 17-page bombshell report on digital assets and tokenization. I was able to go through the comments and find a cliff notes of it, so I don't have to read the whole 17 pages to you. So I'm going to read 4 of the major points from the bill, and then we'll wrap things up for the week. The first one, stablecoin demand for T-bills. The growth in stablecoins, often collateralized with short-dated U.S. Treasuries, is creating a steady demand for these assets. This demand could result in increased issuance of T-bills to accommodate the structural needs of stablecoins. Number 2, financial stability risks. The reliance on T-bills as stablecoin collateral introduces risks if stablecoin markets experience significant volatility or runs. Such a scenario could lead to a fire of T-bill sales, destabilizing the broader market. Number 3, tokenization benefits and challenges. Tokenizing treasuries may improve liquidity and reduce operational efficiencies in trading. However, risks like liquidity mismatches and the need for regulatory compliance and governance are critical concerns. A permissioned blockchain model, likely managed by a central authority, is suggested for stability and control. Number 4, hedging and demand effects. As digital asset markets continue to grow, tokenized treasuries could serve as hedging instruments, adding flight to quality demand during crypto volatility periods. This hedging demand might drive further integration of treasuries with crypto markets, provided they are adequately regulated. This is a potential shift in market operations where digital assets influence treasury issuance and stability, with careful regulatory oversight needed to manage these emerging complexities. We will end this Halloween podcast for Bitcoin right here. Before I do, if you're watching this on YouTube, please consider liking this video, sharing this video, and if you're not already subscribed, click the subscribe button. It helps us out. At the bottom of the screen, whether you're watching this on X or you're watching this on YouTube, you should have our socials going there. Please go follow me on X. I do post consistently daily. You can go through my follows and find all the alpha follows that I'm following as well. Be safe out there, guys. It's Halloween. Don't do anything stupid. And as always, don't trust, verify. Peace.